Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere the travel agencies definitely forgot. You're not on a beach. There's no all-inclusive buffet. No Wi-Fi either. Just the wind whistling through cracked mud walls and a horizon of sand that stretches into a quiet forever. Welcome to Gao, or rather what's left of it. A city once so important, so strangely connected to places halfway around the world, that it might just mess with your mental map. Now don't worry. This won't be a dry history lecture. Well, maybe a little dry. It is in the Sahara, after all, but it's the kind of dryness that comes with sand in your socks and stories hiding beneath every stone. Also, let's be honest, you? Surviving here in the 8th century? Absolutely not. You'd last maybe 10 minutes before begging for air conditioning and Google Translate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. Drop that in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together you walk, not through bustling streets, not yet, just the stillness. The sand whispers under your steps soft like crushed sugar, and ahead of you, in the haze of heat and time, rises a faint outline. Not quite a ruin, not quite forgotten. Gao. At first glance, there's not much here. A few eroded mounds, the shell of a mosque, stones half swallowed by earth. But the silence here has depth, like the pause between drum beats. You feel the wind tug at your sleeves, and with it comes the breath of centuries. It's the 700s CE, give or take a few years. Gao isn't yet the booming capital it will become. Right now it's like a teenager city, still figuring itself out. But already it's got the perfect setup, perched on the Niger River like it's lounging there on purpose, close enough to trade routes to matter, far enough from chaos to thrive. The sun is sinking low, that sticky orange kind of sunset that makes everything glow like it's been glazed in syrup. You wander into a small market square. There's no shouting, no chaos, just quiet bartering. A man gestures silently towards some salt blocks, massive, white, like misplaced icebergs. Another smiles under a blue turban, offering dates the size of your thumb. And then tucked between those everyday goods, something bizarre. Porcelain. Real. Beautiful. Chinese porcelain. At first you think maybe it's a mistake. A replica. Someone's odd attempt at local decor. But no, even now, even this far in the past, you can tell it's the real deal. Smooth, pale. That signature glaze that catches the light like frost. You glance around. No one's treating it like a miracle. To them, it's just another object, another item in the flow of things, as if the desert and the dynasties of Asia have been neighbors all along. Now, if you're wondering, wait, hold up, how did Chinese ceramics get here before AirPods even existed? You're not alone. Kukiya van Chontran. Luan Viviek Chin Zaklam Sao Moigyao Thong Jobat Jiao. Was it Arab middlemen? Did African merchants travel farther than we thought? Force, and this is fun. Maybe there was a rogue Chinese sailor who just really hated boats and walked the rest of the way. Anyway, back to Gao. You sit on a warm stone, watching the last merchants pack up. A woman passes you with a basket balanced on her head, singing softly. The kind of tune that curves like a river bend. You hear children laughing. One has a carved wooden toy that looks suspiciously like a giraffe with anxiety. And still, you can't stop thinking about that porcelain. What story does it tell? A cup doesn't float across continents on its own. Somewhere there were hands, ships, deals whispered at twilight, maybe even danger, pirates, storms, betrayal, really bad seafood. There's a legend, not well known, that a camel caravan once arrived in Gao carrying more than salt and cloth. Hidden among the goods were scrolls, maps with curved writing and tiny painted dragons. Supposedly no one could read them. One scholar tried and claimed they weren't maps at all, but poetry. You chuckle. Sounds about right. Imagine surviving a transcontinental trip just to deliver haikus to the wrong address. As night falls, the desert transforms. It's no longer gold, but deep indigo. The stars begin their slow reveal. Not the shy twinkle of city skies, but bold, brazen constellations. You lie back, your head on packed earth still warm from the day, and wonder, how many nights like this did a Songhai merchant gaze up, thinking about foreign lands? You feel a shift. The city grows hazy, not from sand, but from time. You blink, and for a second, you see Gao again, not as ruins, but alive. Towers of red mud brick, lanterns swaying in doorways, a boat sliding past on the river, its sails striped like a tiger's sigh. And there, in a distant doorway, someone is holding a bowl, not just any bowl, the same type of porcelain you saw earlier. He turns it in his hands, admiring how it catches the light. Then he places it on a shelf beside carved ivory and beads of amber. You imagine him thinking, another piece in the puzzle, another line in a poem written across continents. And then it fades again. You're back in the silence, the real silence, where all you can hear is the wind brushing against stone and the soft rhythmic hum of your own breath. No one remembers the first porcelain bowl in Gao. No record remains of who brought it or how long they traveled. All that's left is the bowl itself, fragile, defiant, like memory. So you turn over, blanket up to your chin, the image of desert stars in your mind. The city hasn't even reached its peak yet. There are still gold caravans to come and royal, courts to whisper through and secrets to hide in salt. But for now you rest. The past will wait until morning, or at least until the next section. When morning creeps into Gao, it doesn't arrive with birdsong or sunlight streaming through shutters. It arrives as warmth, quiet, creeping, inevitable, like someone slowly turning up the world's thermostat while you're still trying to sleep. You sit up, rub the sand from your eyes, and from your everything really, and blink at a city that feels older today, a little more confident, because now Gao is waking up to its purpose. The 9th century is rolling in like a slow drum beat, and suddenly Gao isn't just a place you pass through. It's a place you come for trade, for politics, for possibilities. People are arriving from all directions. Berber traders wrapped in sky-blue veils, scholars from across the Niger, even a few very sunburnt-looking men who clearly underestimated the Sahara's hospitality. You walk through the market again, and this time you see it differently. The goods aren't just things, they're messages. Every object says something about who's talking to whom. There's copper from the forests of Central Africa, glass beads likely from India, and, yep, more porcelain. Someone's set up a whole stall now. Teacups arranged like a polite army, just waiting to be misunderstood by desert nomads. But here's the weird bit. You smell tea, actual tea, bitter, smoky, spiced with something unfamiliar. You follow the scent like a cartoon character on autopilot, and find a tent where a man with eyebrows like storm clouds is carefully pouring the drink into chipped, but clearly prized cups. He doesn't look up, just says, 3 cowries or 1 story. You opt for the story. You've always been poor but chatty. He nods slowly and says, it came through Egypt, but before that, it came through the sea. And before that, someone carried it in a jar from the east, not knowing whether it would survive the heat. You sip the tea, it's sharp, earthy, confusing, kind of like trying to explain cryptocurrency to your grandparents. Still, you sit. Because even now, even across languages and centuries, you get the sense that stories are currency here. Everyone's trading them, sometimes without realizing it. A merchant offers a gold coin, not just shiny, but carved with symbols no one in Gao can read. A child skips past, chanting a rhyme about a giraffe and a thunderstorm. It probably means something, or maybe she just likes giraffes. You follow a narrow path down toward the river. It's low today and thick with reeds. A boat is moored there, curved hull, patched sail, smells like wood, fish, and ambition. A young man is loading it with bales of something wrapped in goat hide. When he notices you watching, he grins. Going north, he says. Tagaza, salt mines. You nod, like you understand the full implications. You do not, but he tells you anyway. You trade salt for gold. You bring the gold here. Then someone takes that gold and brings back silk, or books, or porcelain. Sometimes they bring nothing but stories, and you hope they're good ones. Then he leans in, like he's about to tell you a secret. But sometimes the gold doesn't come from the mines. Sometimes it comes from rivers, from somewhere no one knows. The kings guard that knowledge like it's life itself. You ask if he's ever seen it. The secret gold. He just laughs. If I had, I wouldn't be rowing my own boat. Kukiya van kontran luan ve wieczn guan wang that sunamojao. Was it in the fabled mines of Wangara? Or some hidden tributary guarded by spirits, snakes, or very grumpy grandmothers? No one's ever pinned it down. But Gao had it. Oh yes. Enough to make even China take notice, even if they had no idea where Gao was or how to pronounce it. You sit at the water's edge, watching the boat slip away. It disappears upstream like a memory that doesn't want to be remembered, and you think about how odd it is. This place where east meets west and north leans into south. All with no ports, no GPS, no airplane snacks. Back in the heart of the city, something's happening. You hear drums, not war drums, not quite. More like celebration. You wander toward the sound, dodging baskets of millet and the occasional goat with poor social boundaries, and find a square ringed with people. In the center, dancers spin in blue robes, their movements like spirals of wind. One is wearing a necklace made of carved bone and tiny ceramic shards. You spot the glaze, unmistakably Chinese. And again, it's not treated like treasure. It's just part of the rhythm. Someone leans over and tells you it's a wedding. Two families joining, both involved in the merchant guilds. The union isn't just love, it's logistics. A new route opened, a new partnership sealed. You feel a hand tap your shoulder. It's the man from the tea tent. He's holding a rolled parchment. Maps, he says simply. Old ones. You unroll it carefully. It's not precise, not by modern standards. But you see something odd. Lines connecting Gao not just to known cities like Timbuktu or Jen, but to vague symbols near the Indian Ocean. A dragon-shaped squiggle, a lotus, something that could be a rice paddy, or just bad drawing. He smiles. We've been trading longer than they think. That night you lie on your back again, same warm ground, same slow wind, and the stars feel less distant now, like maybe they've heard these stories too. Like they're leaning in just a bit. You think about the gold, the salt, the dancers, the porcelain. You think how many pieces had to move for that bowl to arrive here, and who else across the desert or beyond the seas is wondering the same thing about their own odd artifacts? The night doesn't answer, but it wraps around you like a soft, heavy blanket. Somewhere nearby, a flute plays a single, bending note. You close your eyes, and Gao keeps dreaming. You wake up to the sound of hooves, and lots of them. A soft, steady percussion against the hardened earth, like nature's version of a metronome. Horses, camels, maybe even a donkey who thinks it's more important than it is. And with them, dust, always dust. It moves before the travelers do, announcing them with tiny swirling storms, wrapping their feet in little cloaks of tan. But this isn't just any caravan. As you squint into the haze, you realize this one's different. These aren't your average salt merchants or local herders. These travelers shine, not in a metaphorical way, in an actual way. Gold-threaded turbans, swords with hilts shaped like phoenixes. Even the camels have decorations, beads and bells, and tassels so ornate you half expect one of them to declare itself king. Someone leans over and whispers, from the east, from Zayla, or even farther, maybe Persia. You can't help it. You inch closer, because whoever they are, they've brought with them a kind of silence, not fear but reverence. Gao is watching. The whole city has tilted its head, waiting for these visitors to say something. Eventually they do. Not with a speech, not with scrolls, with trade. They unwrap their bundles like magicians performing a trick, revealing silks that shimmer like lizard skin, incense that smells like secrets, and, of course, more porcelain. Plates this time. Bowls shaped like upside-down moons. One cup has a painted fish, so lifelike you swear it just blinked. The Gao traders respond in kind. Gold dust weighed in little leather pouches, ostrich feathers, ivory so smooth you wonder if it's ever felt sunlight. One man presents a leopard pelt, its spots still bright, its fur so soft it almost forgives the horror of how it got here. And then there's the gift. Because some trades aren't about barter, they're about alliance. One of the visitors offers something small, a charm maybe, a carved symbol you don't recognize. They place it in the hands of a local elder who nods once and tucks it into his robe without a word. It's a moment that says, "We see you." And Gao, for the first time in your memory, seems to stand a little taller. That night the city buzzes, songs echo off clay walls, spices swirl in the air, cumin, cinnamon, something smoky and sharp. You eat something wrapped in a leaf and stuffed with meat and dates, and you don't ask questions because it tastes like happiness. You sit by a fire ringed with merchants, both local and newly arrived, and someone starts telling a story about a city no one's ever seen but everyone talks about. A city so far east the sun forgets to leave. A city where the streets are paved with jade, and boats sail on clouds, and the emperor wears robes made of starlight. The children around the fire gasp. The adults, they smirk, but they listen. Because everyone knows, the farther away a story starts, the more magical it becomes by the time it gets here. Now here's the strange part. The actual historical part. Kukiya van Kontran Luan Vivek I really made contact with Gao during this period. There are records in China, actual Chinese records, that describe an African kingdom rich in gold, where the people speak through drums and their kings ride on silver horses. No one knows for sure if it's Gao they're talking about, but the timeline it lines up, and some of the artifacts found in Gao, fragments of Tang dynasty porcelain, for instance, well, they speak for themselves. Quietly, but persistently. You walk away from the fire with the scent of charcoal in your hair and your head spinning with questions. If these people came from so far away, how did they even find Gao? There's no map app, no dotted line to follow. Just stars, instincts, and an ability to smell gold from across an ocean. You pass by a camel with one ear twitching rhythmically in its sleep and try not to laugh. Even the animals here are dramatic. At the edge of the city, you find the river. Again, it's higher tonight, its current faster, like it knows something's coming. You imagine all the trade routes, all the whispered stories, flowing into this one place, pooling in the folds of Gao like secrets, collecting in a diary. And you think, this isn't the edge of the world. It's the center. A center no one mapped properly. A center that never asked for permission to exist. It just did. Tomorrow those travelers will probably move on, some to Timbuktu, some to Egypt, maybe even farther. Maybe some will head south toward kingdoms that haven't even been carved into memory yet. But tonight, they sleep in Gao, wrapped in soft cloth, dreaming in languages you've never heard under a sky so wide it forgets its own edges. You lie down again. Same spot, same stars, but now with the faint sound of a foreign lullaby drifting through the night. It's sung by someone you'll never meet, in a dialect you'll never learn, but somehow it still feels like it's for you. Your last thought before sleep is almost a joke. Who would have thought a sleepy city on the Niger would make China raise an eyebrow? And then, like all good jokes, the punchline fades into silence, and Gao keeps trading. When you wake, the air tastes different. It's not a metaphor this time. It actually tastes different. Earthier, wetter. The smell of river mud and new grass. Like the land's been freshly brewed. You open your eyes to a thin mist coiling between the homes. The kind of mist that makes everything look like it's wearing a soft filter. Even the goats look mysterious. And as you stretch, careful not to knock over the half-empty gourd beside you, you realize something's shifted. Lisain. Foreign traders are still here, but they're quieter now, more reserved. The sparkle of gold has been replaced with more practical tasks. Drying spices, checking horse hooves, folding silks with surprising gentleness. Gao's rhythm has returned. The brief concert of excitement has turned back into the hum of daily life. But today you're not content to just watch history unfold. Today you want to dig into it. Literally. You follow a boy with an armful of fishing nets to a part of the city you've only heard about, in whispered tones. The ancient quarters. This is the old Gao, not the new markets or the mud-brick mosques, but the bones beneath the skin. A quieter place, half ruins and half memory, where the sun strikes the earth a little too directly and everything feels like it's waiting to be rediscovered. There's a pit here. Not a dramatic Indiana Jones pit, just a hollowed-out patch of land where archaeologists, centuries later, will eventually uncover broken ceramics, rusted iron, and, well, secrets for now, though. It's just you, your toes brushing dry roots and the story that's buried here. You squat down beside a half-buried shard. It's smooth on one side, painted with a blue swirl that curls like a sleeping snake. It's porcelain, unmistakably so, and not just any porcelain. This piece matches styles found in Tang China from the 9th century. And here's the part that makes historians both excited and deeply, deeply confused. There are no official Chinese records of diplomatic contact with Gao at this time. Catch Su. Gao van kontran luan viveken hungmen sunhudanai jenjuk jaibang. Catch now. Was it a gift passed from one trader to another, like a game of historical telephone? Was it stolen, lost, bartered, or purposefully brought as a symbol? Or was there, despite the gaps in the paperwork, some kind of trade envoy, some daring soul who made it from Guangzhou to Gao, armed with silks and tea bricks and a questionable sense of direction? You rub the shard between your fingers, imagining it once held tea or soup or maybe something less dignified. You imagine the hand that painted it, steady, calloused, probably underpaid. Did that artist ever guess their work would end up here thousands of miles away under your nose, in a kingdom the Chinese court never even knew existed? Behind you someone laughs, you turn. It's the boy with the fishing nets, now dangling his feet off a nearby stone ledge. He tosses you a sweet date and points toward the river. There's a boat waiting. Okay, boat is generous. It's more like a canoe's confident cousin, narrow, patched up with love and desperation. Its wooden sides etched with names you can't pronounce. You climb in, the boy pushes off, and the current grabs you immediately. The city pulls away like it's on a lazy conveyor belt, and ahead of you the river opens up like a soft yawn. You drift past other travelers, some poling barges full of cola nuts, some dozing under tarps with bundles of what might be pepper, or might be dead birds. You don't ask. Some things are better left mysterious. As you glide, the boy sings under his breath. It's not a song you know, but it feels old, like river old. The kind of song you don't write down. It just gets absorbed by the water and passed along one ripple at a time. Eventually, you reach a bend in the river where the banks widen and the ground becomes strange, blacker, almost ashy. This is the site of what archaeologists, centuries in the future, will call Gao Ancien. The original Gao, older than the Gao you've been exploring, the parent city. They'll discover not only Chinese pottery here, but glass from Egypt, beads from India, and coins from the Islamic world. all mingling like guests at a party who have nothing in common except they showed up. They'll realize that this city wasn't just a side stop on a trade route. It was a node, a pulsing heart, pumping goods, ideas, and gossip in every direction, and they'll argue endlessly about why it vanished. You step onto the blackened soil. It's dry and cracked, but something about it feels charged, like it remembers too much. The structures here are almost gone, reduced to whispers of walls, outlines of what used to be. You walk along one of these, tracing your fingers over the edge. You can almost hear it. The murmur of markets, the clang of metalworkers, the laughter of children chasing goats that don't want to be chased. Then, just as quickly, it's gone. The boy calls you back to the boat. As you sit again, the sun breaks through the mist, painting the water gold. Actual gold, the kind that made Gao famous, the kind that made kings. And for a moment you wonder, maybe the city didn't disappear, maybe it just changed costumes. Gao isn't a place you find. It's a place you drift into, like fog, like story, like sleep. And as the boat glides back toward home, you lean your head against its side and close your eyes. Just for a moment, just long enough to imagine what's coming next, because something is coming next. History always does. You wake with a sun-warmed cheek, the gentle slap of water against the boat still rocking you like a grandmother who knows better than to wake you fast. Back on land, Gao is louder again. The streets buzz, not with celebration this time, but with purpose. Like the city itself has appointments to keep. You follow the scent of roasting meat through narrow lanes and stumble upon a courtyard where traders are setting up stalls. Not for Gao's locals, but for someone important. You can feel it. Even the goats are behaving, and then you see it. Banners. Not Gao's own fluttering symbols, but new ones, embroidered in intricate Arabic calligraphy that dances like wind-blown ribbons. They hang from the necks of camels, stitched onto robes painted on crates, and the men who wear them. Their clothes shimmer, not from gold, but from confidence. These are emissaries from the Caliphate, Baghdad perhaps, or maybe Cairo, somewhere you've only ever read about in textbooks, and only if your history teacher was feeling generous. But here they are, in Gao, not in a lecture slide, not in a museum. Breathing the same dusty air as you, you edge closer, listening. They speak a blend of Arabic and Soninka, the native tongue of the region, in a rhythm that makes even trade negotiations sound poetic. They're talking salt mostly, and gold, and sometimes pepper, which sounds mundane until you realize pepper was worth its weight in silver in some places. But the real treasure, books, yes, books. They speak of scholars, scribes, and shipments of manuscripts, scrolls of law, poetry, astronomy, all inked meticulously and carried across the sands like sacred cargo. You blink, realizing this desert once buzzed with more than trade. It buzzed with thought. Kukiya van Contran Luanveviechgao was a scholarly city before Timbuktu stole the spotlight. Some say it was. Others roll their eyes and mutter about revisionist fantasies. But what you're seeing now makes it hard to deny. Gao was more than camels and coins. It was curiosity in clay form. One of the emissaries, tall, robes billowing like sails, notices you. He gestures you closer and hands you something unexpected. A page. Not full. Parchment, but a scrap, written in faded ink, with an Arabic script that curves like the river at sunset. You can't read it, not really, but it smells of dust and olive oil and a little bit of magic. He smiles at your puzzled expression. For protection, he says. In Arabic accented French, hundreds of years ahead of schedule. You blink. Did he actually say that? Or are you dreaming again? Doesn't matter. You fold the page and tuck it in your sleeve like a secret. The emissary points you toward the mosque. You hesitate, Not because of fear, but because it's glowing, not with actual light, but the kind of glow that only comes from presence. Authority. You've seen it in cathedrals, in ancient trees, in your mom's eyes when she catches you lying. The great mosque of Gao. Except it's not quite the one in the travel books. This one's smaller, older, more intimate, built of earth and wood. It blends with the desert like it grew here. Inside it's cool and quiet. No gold, no grand altar. Just prayer rugs, beams of light, and silence so thick you feel guilty breathing. You kneel beside a scholar. You can tell he's a scholar because he has that deep forehead crease of someone who's debated philosophy with too many stubborn students. He's writing something, not copying but creating. His ink flows like a melody, and without turning he says, "Knowledge is the only wealth that multiplies when you give it away." You smile. He's not wrong. A small boy runs in barefoot, carrying a bundle of reed pens and a gourd of ink. The scholar dips one, writes a single word on a fresh scrap, and hands it to you. It says, "Rihla, Rihla." Journey? You tuck it with the first. Back outside, the sun is lowering, stretching shadows like long, lazy cats. Traders are packing up. The emissaries are sharing dates and stories. And somewhere, behind one of the market tents, you hear music. A plucked string, a deep drum, a voice that climbs and loops like smoke. The evening smells like spice and sand and maybe, just maybe, the edge of a new chapter, because something is shifting again. You can feel it. New roots are being carved. New alliances whispered. Gao is about to transform again. But for now, you linger. You watch a young girl sell dried figs to a soldier from the east. A grandmother haggle over a bronze bowl she doesn't need but desperately wants. A man dip cloth in indigo so deep it turns his hands celestial. You sit down on a stone step, let the city breathe around you, and you wonder, not for the first time, how many stories like this have slipped between the cracks of history books. How many cities danced and traded and loved and thought and vanished, not because they were unimportant, but because no one stayed long enough to notice. You're here now, noticing. And in the stillness between heartbeats, you hear it again. That river song, soft, persistent, history humming its favorite tune. And you're finally learning the words. You wake before the sun, stirred by the low moan of wind across the riverbank and the faint clatter of hooves. Not horses, no. Donkeys mostly. Camels still snoring, if that's possible. Gao yawns before it stretches. You wander, drawn toward a commotion near the docks. It's not loud, just concentrated. A crowd gathered around a small vessel unlike the others. Not the wide, shallow boats you've seen drifting the Niger. This one's longer, sleeker, built for endurance. And its crew not African. Their skin is lighter, eyes narrower, clothes stitched in a style you can't quite name, but your brain, still fogged from sleep, whispers one word anyway. China. It shouldn't make sense. But here they are, carrying lacquered chests, porcelain jars, bolts of silk that flutter like caught butterflies. You half expect someone to yell, "This isn't canon," but history, as it turns out, has better taste than your textbooks. You inch closer. The Chinese sailors don't speak the local tongue, but they gesture like artists. One holds out a ceramic bowl, sky blue with a dragon curling at the bottom. The Gao merchant opposite him offers a nugget of gold, no bigger than a baby tooth, a fair trade. And suddenly everything feels electric, not in the lightning sense, more like static, the kind that crackles before a revelation. You're witnessing something scholars have argued about for decades. Kach sugiavankon, tran luan, veviech nguoi trung, kwok thuk sujen, tai fi thoi trung. Ko? Some say no. The Sahara was too brutal, the maps too incomplete, the politics too tangled. But others, the bold ones, the dreamers, they insist it happened. That Gao was a link in a chain that stretched from the Middle Kingdom to the kingdoms of the Sahel. And this morning, you're on Team Dreamer. You watch the exchange unfold, silk for ivory, salt for paper fans, even a strange black powder sealed tightly in a bamboo tube. One sailor guards a trunk so carefully it might contain the moon itself. Curiosity wins. You pretend to trip and peek inside. Porcelain. Dozens of hand-painted teacups stacked like treasure. Not for sale, clearly ceremonial. But the care with which they're packed makes you think, these aren't just objects. They're messages. We were here, they seem to say. We saw you. An elder in Gao's robes steps forward. His beard is salt and pepper, his smile, pure diplomacy. He's not bartering, he's greeting. With open arms, he ushers the foreign crew toward a nearby building. Not a market stall, but a council house, judging by the guards. You follow, shameless now. History has no room for pride. Inside, the walls are painted with abstract patterns, some geometric, others winding like water. At the center of the room is a low table, bowls of dried fruit, a jug of honeyed water, and silence. And then, negotiation begins. No shared language. No problem. There's a ritual to this. Items laid on cloth, eyebrows raised, heads tilted. You don't understand the specifics, but the rhythm is unmistakable. Give, consider, adjust, accept. You settle on a bench. Near the back, and a young boy hands you a fig. Warm, sweet, sticky fingers. You thank him, and he nods like this happens all the time. The talks go on for hours, maybe longer. Time blurs in the thick air. You drift in and out, catching phrases, gestures, a joke that makes even the sternest sailor chuckle. It's diplomacy by theater. Eventually, the Chinese delegate, older than the others with a face like weathered jade, takes out a scroll. It's tied with red silk and unrolls like it's been waiting centuries to do so. Maps, but not of China, of Africa, or at least the shape of it. Vague, but present. Gao is marked in a red circle. You blink. This is no exploratory voyage. This is a return, and your heart does a small cartwheel in your chest. When they finally part ways, the scroll remains with the Gao Council. In return, a small statue of a crocodile, carved from obsidian, is placed in the Chinese elder's hands. Not a trinket, a token. They smile, bow slightly, the kind of bow that says, "We're not so different, you and I." The sun has climbed. High by the time they leave, their ship pushes off with barely a splash. You watch them fade into the horizon, sails snapping like impatient flags. No grand declarations, no headlines, just a quiet brushstroke on the canvas of history. You sit on the dock, legs dangling, watching the ripples. A child skips past, singing something rhythmic. A dog chases a fish that does not want to be chased. A trader yells about missing scales, and someone steals a date right from the stall. Life returns to its usual chaos. And yet, everything feels different, like you just read a secret note in someone's diary. Back in the market, a man is selling tiny clay replicas of that crocodile statue. From the East, he calls. Rare, powerful. You buy one. Why not? History's never quite as dusty as people make it out to be. As you walk away, a breeze kicks up. You think you hear the word "Rila" again, echoing faintly between the stalls, like a story trying not to be forgotten. You press the tiny crocodile in your hand and smile. It might have been a dream, but if so, it's the kind of dream that writes itself into memory, like silk threading through sun-warmed air. You wander deeper into Gao's alleys, still clinging to the feel of porcelain and the image of that ancient map with your city's name circled in red ink. Something about it unsettles you, in a good way, like realizing your family tree has A missing branch that stretches halfway around the world. That night you can't sleep. Not because of the heat or the rustling animals or even the guy 3 huts over who snores like a jammed flute. It's the idea of that map, of what it means. You lie there staring at the woven ceiling, wondering what else was left out of the stories you thought you knew. By morning, you've decided. You want to know more. So you find the old scholar. Every city has one, the type who hoards parchment like it's cake and gets excited about clay shards with smudges. In Gao, this scholar is a woman named Ayana, and she's a hurricane in human form. She talks fast, moves faster, and glares like an eagle when you interrupt her scroll sorting. You tell her what you saw, the sailors, the map, the gifts exchanged. She doesn't blink. Instead, she waves you inside. And what you find there? Shelves, stacks, scrolls so old they look like they might sigh if unrolled. But it's the corner that catches your eye, a flat slab covered in symbols scratched into dark wood diagrams, arrows, not Arabic, not Chinese. Trade routes. Ayana grins. You think this is new, she says. Child, we've been playing the long game. Gao has always been a door. The Chinese didn't find us by accident. They followed whispers. She explains. Centuries earlier, before written records were even a thing for most, there were travelers, griots, merchants, pilgrims, and they all carried 2 things, goods and stories. Some of those stories made their way to the east, through Persia, across the silk trails, through tangled kingdoms and merchant courts, until finally, a rumor reached the South China Sea. A golden river, a city that traded in sunlight, a land, with salt in its bones and fish with human teeth. Okay, that part was probably exaggerated, but still. And here's the fun part. Kach su gia van kontran luan veviek motna su fat giao tungjat chanjengao vau the Kithu 9. His name? Lost. But Ayana claims one of the older scrolls refers to a silent man in orange cloth who drew birds that had never been seen here. You pause. A Buddhist monk sketching West African parrots? That would explain the one scroll she shows you next. Fragile, stiff with age, but unmistakable. A phoenix-like bird perched above a braided river. Exactly how Gao looks from the cliffs. Ayana doesn't say it's Chinese, but she does say, no one here drew birds with 5 claws. That's not us. And the phoenix. In Chinese law, a fenghuang, symbol of virtue, of harmony. Coincidence? Possibly. But as you sit cross-legged in her cluttered workspace, paging through drawings of wild creatures and wide-eyed merchants, the coincidences start to stack up like game pieces. Silk fibers in Malian tombs, porcelain shards near the bend of the Niger, even a curious tea recipe scrawled in old Song Dynasty script that lists baobab fruit as an ingredient. You raise an eyebrow. Ayana raises one higher. So, she says, do you still think history is what your school told you it was? You don't answer, because that crocodile statue in your pocket feels a little heavier now. That evening, Ayana takes you to the old gate of the city. Not much to see, just 2 leaning towers and a half-collapsed arch. But she tells you this was once called the Gate of Direction, because travelers who passed through either found their path or lost their way entirely. You lean on one of the towers, letting the breeze whip your sleeves. Somewhere out there, beyond the trees, lies the trail they came by. Chinese sailors, Buddhist monks, traders with dragon tattoos and stories that glowed under moonlight. Not myths. People. People who left behind pieces. Ayana leaves you with a stack of her translated notes and a warning. The past is not polite. It doesn't always leave doors open. Sometimes you have to crawl through windows. You nod, unsure if that's metaphor or instruction, and that night as you fall asleep, your mind does what it always does. It spins stories, but this time they're tinted in red ink and dragon blue. They smell like incense and dust, like boatwood, And hot copper coins. You don't dream of kings or castles. You dream of a conversation, one that never ended, just paused. You wake before the sun, stirred by the low moan of wind across the riverbank and the faint clatter of hooves. Not horses, no. Donkeys mostly. Camels still snoring, if that's possible. Gao yawns before it stretches. You wander, drawn toward a commotion near the docks. It's not loud, just concentrated. A crowd gathered around a small vessel unlike the others, not the wide, shallow boats you've seen drifting the Niger. This one's longer, sleeker, built for endurance. And its crew not African. Their skin is lighter, eyes narrower, clothes stitched in a style you can't quite name, but your brain, still fogged from sleep, whispers one word anyway. China. It shouldn't make sense. But here they are, carrying lacquered chests, porcelain jars, bolts of silk that flutter like caught butterflies. You half expect someone to yell, "This isn't canon," but history, as it turns out, has better taste than your textbooks. You inch closer. The Chinese sailors don't speak the local tongue, but they gesture like artists. One holds out a ceramic bowl, sky blue with a dragon curling at the bottom. The Gao merchant opposite him offers a nugget of gold, no bigger than a baby tooth, a fair trade. And suddenly everything feels electric, not in the lightning sense, more like static, the kind that crackles before a revelation. You're witnessing something scholars have argued about for decades. Kach sugiavankon, tran luan, ve viech nguoi trung, kwok thuk sujen, tai fi thoi trung. Ko? Some say no. The Sahara was too brutal, the maps too incomplete, the politics too tangled. But others, the bold ones, the dreamers, they insist it happened. That Gao was a link in a chain that stretched from the Middle Kingdom to the kingdoms of the Sahel. And this morning, you're on Team Dreamer. You watch the exchange unfold, silk for ivory, salt for paper fans, even a strange black powder sealed tightly in a bamboo tube. One sailor guards a trunk so carefully it might contain the moon itself. Curiosity wins. You pretend to trip and peek inside. Porcelain. Dozens of hand-painted teacups stacked like treasure. Not for sale, clearly ceremonial. But the care with which they're packed makes you think, these aren't just objects. They're messages. We were here, they seem to say. We saw you. An elder in Gao's robes steps forward. His beard is salt and pepper, his smile, pure diplomacy. He's not bartering, he's greeting. With open arms, he ushers the foreign crew toward a nearby building. Not a market stall, but a council house, judging by the guards. You follow, shameless now. History has no room for pride. Inside, the walls are painted with abstract patterns, some geometric, others winding like water. At the center of the room is a low table, bowls of dried fruit, a jug of honeyed water, and silence. And then, negotiation begins. No shared language. No problem. There's a ritual to this. Items laid on cloth, eyebrows raised, heads tilted. You don't understand the specifics, but the rhythm is unmistakable. Give, consider, adjust, accept. You settle on a bench. Near the back, and a young boy hands you a fig. Warm, sweet, sticky fingers. You thank him, and he nods like this happens all the time. The talks go on for hours, maybe longer. Time blurs in the thick air. You drift in and out, catching phrases, gestures, a joke that makes even the sternest sailor chuckle. It's diplomacy by theater. Eventually, the Chinese delegate, older than the others, with a face like weathered jade, takes out a scroll. It's tied with red silk and unrolls like it's been waiting centuries to do so. Maps, but not of China, of Africa, or at least the shape of it. Vague, but present. Gao is marked in a red circle. You blink. This is no exploratory voyage. This is a return, and your heart does a small cartwheel in your chest. When they finally part ways, the scroll remains with the Gao Council. In return, a small statue of a crocodile, carved from obsidian, is placed in the Chinese elder's hands, not a trinket, a token. They smile, bow slightly, the kind of bow that says, "We're not so different, you and I." The sun has climbed. High by the time they leave, their ship pushes off with barely a splash. You watch them fade into the horizon, sails snapping like impatient flags. No grand declarations, no headlines, just a quiet brushstroke on the canvas of history. You sit on the dock, legs dangling, watching the ripples. A child skips past, singing something rhythmic. A dog chases a fish that does not want to be chased. A trader yells about missing scales, and someone steals a date right from the stall. Life returns to its usual chaos. And yet, everything feels different, like you just read a secret note in someone's diary. Back in the market, a man is selling tiny clay replicas of that crocodile statue. "From the East," he calls. "Rare, powerful. You buy one. Why not? History's never quite as dusty as people make it out to be." As you walk away, a breeze kicks up. You think you hear the word "Rila" again, echoing faintly between the stalls, like a story trying not to be forgotten. You press the tiny crocodile in your hand and smile. It might have been a dream, but if so, it's the kind of dream that writes itself into memory, like silk threading through sun-warmed air. You wake up slowly, the kind of slow where your limbs feel like they've sunk a little too far into the mattress, or in your case, the woven mat you dragged from the corner of Ayana's room. The light is softer today. Or maybe it just feels that way because your brain is still tangled in that underground chamber, still hearing voices that haven't been spoken aloud for hundreds of years. You stretch, sit up, and reach instinctively into your pocket. Yep, the sand's still there, a few grains clinging stubbornly to your palm. You consider throwing it out, but something about it anchors you, like a breadcrumb from the past. You're not done following. Ayana's journal has another riddle, or maybe a clue. It's hard to tell with her. Half her notes read like shopping lists from a dimension where coriander is a unit of time. This one says, "Follow the river that remembers. Find the city that forgot." You chew on that over breakfast, millet porridge with too much cardamom and not enough sugar, and then head toward the Niger River, that lazy, winding thread of life through Mali. Locals call it Jelly-Bani, the Great River. It's the kind of river that doesn't just flow. It meanders like someone telling a story they keep interrupting themselves to finish. You walk along the banks, watching boats with patched sails drift like slow thoughts. Fishermen call out. Children splash each other and pretend not to notice you, then burst into giggles when you wave. But you're following something different, the memory of an empire. And about 20 kilometers upstream, when your legs are ready to mutiny and your water bottle is somehow both empty and leaking, you see them, ruins, half buried, almost invisible. The city that forgot. It doesn't have a name anymore. At least, not one that people remember. But once it was called Kukiya. Before Gao, before Timbuktu, this was the heartbeat. This is where the first rulers of the Songhai made their mark, not on paper, but in mud brick and copper, in goat trails turned trade roads. And yet, no one really talks about Kukiya. It's like the city aged backwards, started old, grew powerful, then vanished into a whisper. You walk its empty lanes, brushing dust from what might have been a doorway. You find shards of ceramic, a bone comb, the edge of a brass bangle, nothing grand, but everything human. And then you find the well, not deep, just enough to offer. Cool water if you dig out the top layer of silt. Someone once carved symbols around the rim, crude but deliberate, a spiral, a sun, a boat. You sit there soaking your scarf in the water and draping it over your neck like you've just invented medieval air conditioning. And that's when it hits you. This place, Kukiya, wasn't forgotten. It was hidden, tucked away from colonial eyes. Swallowed by time, yes, but protected too, like a memory someone wasn't ready to let go of. You remember what a historian once said, well, whispered during a panel where everyone else was arguing loudly about camel tax records. Some cities choose to be forgotten. It's safer that way, and it makes sense now, because this place feels quiet in a protective way, not abandoned, just waiting. You look west, where the sun is already plotting its dramatic exit, and you see a shimmer. Not quite a mirage, more like a memory flickering into view. A caravan, not modern, not quite ancient either. It blinks into being like film on old reel, slightly jumpy, soundless. Men in indigo robes, camels packed with silk and copper, and, at the center, a woman, tall, cloaked, holding a ledger in one hand and a blade in the other. You blink, and she's gone. No dust trail, no footprints, just you, alone again. But not really, because history's funny like that. Sometimes it shows up late and silent, like a guest who forgot to knock. Katsugia van kontran luan veviek liu Kukiya tung latu jo that su qua song hai hei chila mot trong nung tien jon tam thoi. Some say it was symbolic. Others claim the records that say otherwise were destroyed, or worse, never written at all. But you don't need scrolls, you can feel it. That pulse beneath the ground, that stubbornness in the air, like something happened here that refuses to be completely erased. As dusk folds the sky into shades of iron and rust, you find a low wall still standing, just enough to lean against and watch the river. You imagine merchants pulling up small boats, unloading bolts of silk dyed with crushed berries and fish bladder. You imagine someone offering tea, always too sweet, and news from the coast. You imagine the woman again, ledger and blade, and something about her looks familiar, not in the face but in the posture, in the way she watches the city behind her like it belongs to her, but not in a greedy way, more like a librarian, guarding a story. Maybe that's what you're doing too. You lean back, let your eyes close just for a moment. The night hums with crickets, distant drums, and the lazy gurgle of a river older than the maps that try to tame it. Sleep creeps in sideways like it always does here, but before you drift off you whisper the name Kukiya, and even though no one else is around to hear it, the word feels heard. Morning arrives with a breeze that smells faintly of charcoal and tamarind. You wake slower this time, the memory of last night's dream still sitting on your chest like a silk cloth, light but impossible to ignore. Outside, Gao buzzes with the rhythm of daily life. People are pounding millet, carrying jars on their heads like effortless ballet, shouting across dusty alleys about the price of fish. But you move differently now, like someone holding a secret, or maybe a map no one else knows how to read, because you do have something now. Ayana's notes, they're a mess to be honest. Handwritten pages in 3 languages, ink-smudged diagrams, and at least one doodle of a cat labeled not helpful. But hidden in the mess is a phrase that keeps catching your eye. The salt trail bends east before the dune with no shadow. Cryptic, poetic, or possibly the result of Ayana running out of candlelight. Still, you can't stop thinking about it, so you follow it. You find the edge of Gao's salt trade route, the one where caravans of camels still pass like slow-moving clouds. You walk, past the last market stall, past the children playing dice with animal bones, past the spot where someone once buried jars of Tang Dynasty tea, which, by the way, tasted like sweet dirt when you tried it. 0 stars would not sip again. Then, you see it, the dune. It really has no shadow, which is weird, because everything else does, even you do. You walk up to it, squinting, cautious, and then you notice it's not a dune. It's not entirely. It's covering something buried stone. You dig with your hands like a kid in a sandbox, except the sand here bites. Tiny grains so fine they find your fingernails and never leave. But after half an hour, you uncover what looks like a floor, no, a mosaic, blue, red, gold. The colors have faded, but the shapes are still there, swirls and waves. And at the center, a symbol, a circle. Inside it, two creatures. One is a crocodile, the other, a long, twisting dragon. They're circling each other. You sit back on your heels, panting, laughing a little, because suddenly things are making sense. In that way history rarely allows. Trade is not just about goods, it's about ideas. And symbols, they travel farther than coins. Here's where things get especially spicy. Historians have long argued about the origin of this mosaic. Kagsugiavan kontran luan viviek nukodatsu lakwa trunkwok. Kohechila bansaujuok viboingoi banjiatheoloi, ketukach thwonghan. But one thing's certain, dragons are not native to Mali. And yet here you are staring at one wrapped around a crocodile. You dig further, not with your hands now, but with your thoughts. Ayana's notes mention a house of echoes near the edge of the salt route, a chamber where travelers used to gather at sunset to exchange tales. Some say the building amplified voices in strange ways. Others believed it was cursed. Either way, it burned down centuries ago. But what if that mosaic wasn't just decorative? What if it marked the entrance? You spend the afternoon tracing the ground around the mosaic, muttering like a budget Indiana Jones. Eventually, your foot hits something hollow. You clear away the sand and uncover a slanted stone, a lid. It takes work, and more upper body strength than you'd prefer to use in this lifetime, but eventually it opens, a stairwell descending into cool darkness. Naturally, you go down. You're not in a bedtime story for nothing. The air below is thick with dust and the smell of long-dead spice. You click on your flashlight, because unlike the past, you came prepared, and the walls flare to life, covered in carvings, Chinese characters, but also Tifinagh script, Arabic, symbols, animals. This was a meeting place, a neutral zone. You can almost hear the echo of languages blending, the clink of cups, the hum of old songs sung in dialects long dead. The air feels alive with it, like every word ever spoken here left a tiny footprint behind. You reach the bottom and find a round chamber. At its center, a stone table cracked down the middle. On it, items left behind. A jade hairpin, a rusted coin with a square hole, and, because history has a sense of humor, a chicken feather preserved in lacquer. You sit, not because you're tired, okay, maybe a little, but because this place demands reverence. It's one thing to read about connections across continents. It's another thing entirely to feel it in the stone beneath you. You close your eyes, and in the dark, with the sound of your breath echoing like waves against old walls, you think, we've always been connected, not always equally, not always kindly, but always. And if a dragon and a crocodile could share space in a mosaic once buried beneath centuries of dust and denial, maybe there's more of that old magic left than the textbooks want to admit. You leave the chamber with a handful of sand in your pocket. Souvenir or superstition, who's to say? But that night, when you sleep, your dreams come in foreign alphabets and whispered trade routes, and the stars above Gao flicker like lanterns strung from the Silk Road itself. You feel the sun dipping lower as you wander back toward the river, the air cooling just enough to chase away the heat's stubborn grip. The market's noise fades behind you, replaced by the gentle lap of water against the shore. A rhythm, older than any trade route or city name. You find a spot on the bank where the reeds whisper and the mud squishes softly beneath your feet. Sitting down, you pull out your notebook. The pages already filled with sketches of mosaics, notes about trade goods, and a few half-baked theories. You remember the story of the Chinese porcelain shards found not just in big cities, but deep inland, miles from the ocean. How they puzzled archaeologists because it implied trade routes stretching further than anyone had dared imagine. The idea makes you grin. Imagine caravans hauling silk and porcelain across the Sahara. You can almost hear the camels grumbling about the weight, plotting revenge by kicking sand into the eyes of the next traveler. The traders must have been like the ultimate multitaskers, handling goods, languages, currencies, and maybe even subtle political dramas, all while trying not to get sunstroke. And here's a fun fact. Some of the beads found in these ruins weren't just from nearby regions, but traced back to China and India. Tiny pieces of glass and faience traveling thousands of miles before landing in the palm of a Songhai merchant. You flip to a fresh page and write, trade wasn't just about stuff. It was about stories, alliances, and maybe the occasional questionable barter, like trading salt for a pottery cat. Then you laugh softly, imagining that cat judging you. But as fascinating as this is, you realize something. No one really knows the full extent of these exchanges. The historical record is patchy, some lost, some deliberately erased. Kukiya van kontran luan vevieklu, nhang kon juang thuong mai nai ko thuksu noi lien, tai fi voi trung kwok mot kach lien, tak hai chi lan hung su kin rai rak, tham chi la truyen thuyet fa chut fongjai. You watch a small boat glide by, a lone fisherman steering with practiced ease. The river doesn't care about debates or missing records. It just keeps flowing, linking places and people quietly and persistently. You close your notebook and let the river's steady song wash over you. Maybe that's what history is after all. Not just dates and names, but the flow beneath everything, connecting us in ways we can't always see. You stand, dusting off your pants, and prepare to follow the river's path again, because the journey's just getting started. The river bends like a lazy snake, and so do your thoughts as you follow its winding path. You notice how the air cools slightly as the shadows stretch longer, the sun beginning its slow descent behind distant dunes. You're tired, but there's a strange energy in the fading light, like the world itself is leaning in to listen. You pause at a cluster of baobab trees, their massive trunks looking like the ancient sentinels they are, silent witnesses to centuries of comings and goings. You lean against one, feeling the rough bark press into your back, and close your eyes. There's a legend the locals tell here, about a great trade caravan led by a woman named Amina. They say she was fearless, clever, and ruled her people with a mind sharper than any sword. Some stories even say she negotiated with distant Chinese merchants, who traveled all the way to this dusty edge of the world, exchanging goods and ideas as easily as a smile. You smile to yourself, thinking about how different this is from the typical history lessons filled with kings and battles. Here it's about connection, about women and men building bridges where others saw deserts. You remember the mosaics dragon and crocodile, how strange and perfect that pairing seemed, a symbol of two worlds entwined. Maybe Amina's story is one of those bridges, but then again not everything is clear. Kukiya van kontran luan veviekko that sutontai mot nuthwong han hu Amina, hai chila sutong hop kwan hiu. Kau chuyen van han vat kwathojian. You open your eyes to the soft murmur of the river, the birds settling into their evening chorus. The baobabs creak gently in the breeze, like old ships rocking in invisible waves. You reach into your bag and pull out a small faded map from Ayana's journal. It shows trade routes, some marked, others faded into mystery. Tracing a line with your finger, you imagine the path a caravan might take, crossing rivers, deserts, and mountains, all the way to distant lands. And somewhere along that route, stories like Amina's were whispered around campfires, passed down like precious cargo. You chuckle softly. Makes you wonder if the camels ever got tired of carrying the weight, not just of goods, but of legends, hopes, and secrets. As twilight deepens, you pack up, feeling the weight of the day settling into your bones. This story isn't just about lost cities or mysterious mosaics anymore. It's about the people, bold, resilient, and endlessly inventive, who made this dusty crossroads a place where worlds met and mingled. You stand, brushing dust off your clothes, and glance back once more at the baobab standing tall against the deepening sky. The river keeps flowing, and so do the stories. Tonight you rest with that thought, soft, steady, and strangely comforting. As night gently blankets the sky, you find yourself drawn toward the ruins again, their outlines ghostly in the moonlight. The air is cooler now, carrying whispers of long-gone footsteps, faint echoes of traders who once crossed these sands with their precious loads. You step carefully among the stones, feeling the weight of history press softly against your skin like a familiar worn blanket. You recall the incredible discovery of ancient coins found buried beneath layers of dust. Coins, minted with Chinese characters, mingling with local symbols. It's a curious blend that makes you grin, imagining some medieval merchant paying for salt with shiny little discs that bore scripts none of his fellow traders could read. A kind of universal language. Here's some shiny stuff, please, and thank you. It's funny how money, that everyday tool we all take for granted, becomes such a powerful relic in history, sometimes the only clue left to trace vanished empires and forgotten cities. But not everything is so clear-cut. Kukiya van kontran luan viviexen hung jong shunai kothak su chungmin, sugyao thong truk tieb gua trong kwok vatai fi hai chi jon gian la ket kwa. Kwa mo chuoi trung gian keo dai kwa nihiu the key. You wander deeper into the ruins, your fingers brushing against worn carvings that hint at stories now almost lost to time. The mosaic's intricate design flashes in your memory. How it combined motifs from both African and Asian cultures, almost like a secret handshake between civilizations, separated by thousands of miles. You think about the craftsmen who made these tiles. Did they hear tales of faraway lands? Were they inspired by traders' stories or by dreams of places they'd never see? And here's a fun thought. Maybe they were the original influencers, blending styles like today's designers, mash up cultures in viral videos, except their audience was the gods, or maybe the ancestors, rather than millions of scrolling thumbs. You shake your head softly, the absurdity of it all making the story more human, more real. Outside the ruins, the desert night hums softly. Crickets chirping, stars blinking like ancient eyes watching over the land. You settle down on a cool stone, letting the silence seep into your bones. History isn't just facts and dates. It's the touch of stones, the shine of coins, the blending of stories. And maybe, just maybe, the most boring histories are the ones that connect us all the most. You close your eyes, the mosaic's dragon and crocodile still swirling gently. Behind your eyelids, a quiet reminder of the worlds that once met here beneath these very stars. The night deepens and the desert cools, wrapping around you like a soft, worn quilt. You rise slowly, leaving the mosaic's silent gaze behind, and set off along a narrow path flanked by thorny acacias. Your footsteps crunch quietly over gravel. The only sound besides the occasional hoot of an owl, nature's subtle nod to your solitary journey. You think back to the ancient trade routes that threaded through this region like veins carrying life's pulse. They weren't just paths for goods, but arteries of culture, language, and dreams. You picture camel caravans winding through sandstorms, traders bartering with smiles sharp as knives, and goods changing hands like whispered secrets. Remember the surprise discovery of Chinese silk fragments far inland, silk that had journeyed across thousands of miles, carried by merchants who probably never imagined their threads would end up draped over African rulers' shoulders. It's like the original global trade network, long before planes or container ships made the world smaller. You chuckle softly. Imagine the camels gossiping on the way. Did you hear about that silk? Heard it so fine it can tickle the nose from 10 feet away, but the story isn't all straightforward. Kukiya van kon tranch luan ve viek leo kach. Lotrin thuang mai nai ko juk dui trillion tu kai chi thin thuang noi lai kwa kas thui ki kas now. You pause beside a shallow well, cupping your hands to sip the cool water. The liquid tastes faintly of earth and history, grounding you in a moment that stretches beyond time. The ruins nearby whisper tales of a once vibrant city, its markets bustling, its docks busy with ships from distant lands, its people weaving together threads of Africa and Asia into a tapestry that defied geography. It's humbling to realize that, despite centuries of silence, these stories still flow beneath the surface, waiting for someone like you to listen. You lean back against a rock, gazing up at the vast canvas of stars. Each one twinkles with a secret, a fragment of a story that might never be told fully. And as the desert wind carries soft dust past your ears, you feel a quiet kinship with those ancient traders, travelers not unlike yourself, wandering vast. Landscapes in search of connection, understanding, and maybe a little bit of magic. You breathe deeply, letting the night stillness wrap around you, because sometimes the most profound journeys are the ones that don't need grand discoveries, just the patience to listen to the whispers of the past. And here, beneath this endless sky, those whispers feel loud enough to fill a lifetime. As the first light of dawn gently brushes the horizon with pale gold, you find yourself back near the riverbank. The night's coolness still lingers in the air, and the soft rustle of leaves blends with the distant calls of waking birds. You settle once more by the water's edge, the gentle current weaving a quiet lullaby. You think about how this story, of lost cities, ancient mosaics, and the far-flung trade routes, has been less about grand battles or famous kings, and more about the subtle, persistent connections that shape human history. Like threads in a vast, intricate tapestry, woven through time and space, often invisible but always there. It's strange to realize how much of history is stitched together from fragments, shards of pottery, weathered coins, and faded mosaics that speak in whispers. And in those whispers you find echoes of people much like yourself, curious, hopeful, and determined to reach beyond the horizons they knew. The debates among historians linger in the background, unresolved and perhaps unresolvable, but that's part of the charm. History isn't a fixed story. It's a living conversation, inviting you to add your own questions, your own wonder. You watch as the sunlight softens, casting warm hues over the ruins and the river alike. The mosaics, dragon and crocodile, once so vibrant in your mind, now seem to shimmer gently in the morning light. Symbols of worlds once intertwined, their stories far from forgotten. Now, as you prepare to leave this place, you feel a calm settling deep inside. The river's flow, the cool desert breeze, and the silent stones all seem to whisper a quiet truth, that the past is always with us, flowing just beneath the surface, waiting for us to listen. So as you stand and brush the dust from your clothes, you carry with you a simple, comforting thought, that in the vast tapestry of time, every step you take is a thread connecting you to those who came before. And with that, you take a deep breath, letting the gentle warmth of the rising sun fill you. The story winds down, soft and slow, like a song fading into a peaceful night. End of script. Sweet dreams.